Hi, I'm Katie from Whatever Katie Sews, and if you'd like to know more about sewing this dress, the Paco Peralta Vogue V1593, then grab a cuppa and stick around. Welcome back to my channel for those of you who are already subscribed, and for anyone who is new here, welcome, and I hope you'll think about subscribing. So today I am actually going to talk about a dress that I made, and you will have seen it briefly in my last video about my summer makes, and I wanted to talk in detail about it a bit more. So this video will be all about that dress. And probably around the beginning of September, I decided that I'd really like a slow and steady project that I could really get my teeth into. And for any of you who have followed my videos for a while, you'll know that that is quite unusual. I normally like quick makes, instant gratification, up on Instagram quickly, and wearing it the next day. But for some reason, I don't know if it was a change of seasons or whatever, I just wanted to do a project where I could sit for my evenings hour after hour and really make something to last. So I will start with the cost of this. So as you can see, it is a Vogue pattern. It is a paper pattern, which I don't buy too often. Most of what I get are indie companies and I buy the PDF and print them out. But there was a sale on at Jaycott's in around January, February time, and all Vogue patterns were half price. So this was actually £16 reduced down to £8. Now, £16 seems an awful lot of money, but £8 seemed pretty reasonable, especially as I didn't have to print it out, which was good, as it meant that, I've got it here and I could get going pretty quickly, except that I didn't. So this project has sat, well, I would say half done, not even done. So I started by thinking that I was going to trace the pattern, as it's a paper pattern and it was quite expensive. And I traced part of it and I ended up doing it in the wrong size. And it just sat there for months and months. And in the end, I decided that with all of this procrastination, that actually I was just going to cut the pattern because it was the tracing that was putting me off. It's got multiple pieces, it had, it's got lining, it's got everything else. And I just thought, you know what, I just want to get stuck in. So I cut the pattern, which I know makes me go to sewing hell, but I'll take my chances. And I got going with it. So it really just sped me up. And thinking about it now, I think maybe I potentially would bite the bullet and do that again, because even if I cut too much off, I could still retrace the pattern and add bits onto it. It's not the end of the world, and if it's actually going to put me off sewing, then I think it's just something that I might have to do. So paper patterns can have their own challenges, whereas you don't have to print them. I did have to decide which size I was going to buy before I bought it. Vogue patterns, well, this particular one, and I think maybe most of them come in a size 6 to 12 and a size 14 to 22. And I looked at the measurements and I went for the bigger size, and that takes you from hips 38 to 46. I'm just reading that so I get it right. And I went for this size, and as I said, I just decided that I could always adjust the pattern if I needed to. I started by making 2 tests of this dress, and the first one I made in a Ponte, which I got from Colville last year, and I didn't really know whether to do this in a stretch or a woven fabric, and it looked like it could be done in both. And I went on to Pinterest and Instagram for a bit of inspiration, but the dress wasn't really that prominent. I think there are a few pictures of a few that have been made, and I find that a lot with the big pattern companies. You find a lot of pictures of the indie patterns but not so many of the big pattern companies. And I actually messaged one of the ladies who had put up a picture and asked her about the fabric, and whether I could do it in a woven fabric. And she said that that would be fine if the fabric didn't have any stretch. Then I needed to take that into account and maybe size up a little bit in some areas. So I did bear that in mind, and I made the ponte in the first instance, and it was absolutely huge. And I don't think that was really to do with the stretch, because there wasn't much stretch in the ponte at all. And I find this a lot with the Big Four, and I have made a Vogue dress before, so maybe I should have known. I do go by my measurements, but my measurements said that I should be a size 18, and actually it was obvious that I needed to cut down to a size 14, which is actually what I did last time I made a Vogue dress, so you would have thought I would have learnt. But you do get nervous because you think, well, no, I better go by the measurements on the packet. Now, what is also interesting is that I, like to look at the finished garment, but the finished garment on the packet was giving you the width of the bottom of the dress and the length of the back of the dress, which isn't particularly useful for me anyway. I'm sure it must be useful for someone, otherwise they wouldn't put it, but that isn't really what I wanted to know. I want to really know the finished garment around my hips and my waist to see how it is going to be. So with that first test out the way, which I pretty much made the whole thing, but I didn't do the lining, I had then decided by then, right, I am going to do it in a denim. And the only denim I had was also from Colville, I think from last year, and it had no stretch in it. So I decided that my next test needed to be made in something without any stretch. So I made it out of a non-stretch cotton that I actually got right at the beginning of my sewing journey at a place called Wrap, which is a warehouse. It's a local warehouse where they have offcuts and collections from local shops and fabric places and factories, and basically a huge place where you can go for lots of different craft materials and remnants. So you pay a membership fee and once a year, and then you can go and you can fill up your bags for free as often as you like. And the one is near me is about half an hour away, so I was a member for a year, and I found that I just got a lot of fabric, and it wasn't necessarily things that I need, so I didn't end up renewing my membership. Although maybe if I found one which was closer to me that I was more likely to pop into, then maybe I would think about doing that again. But I know that they're all over the country, so it's definitely worth looking for those if there is one near you. So after doing the test in the non-stretch cotton, I felt absolutely ready to go. I had made it up without the lining, but I didn't feel like I needed to make the lining as well, so I got going with the real thing. Now, I think that the material was a great material to make it with. Now I will show probably some twirls or something like that a bit later on in the video, or I might have already done it depending on the editing. So this is actually the material here, and you can see, and part of it is lined with the same material, and then part of it has a lining material. And I didn't regret not putting stretch, using a stretch material. It did work, but what I would say is that because it didn't stretch, it was a lot harder to sew because it all had to fit very nicely. Stretch fabrics are very forgiving. I don't think you need to fit them as well, but with woven I really had to get it right. And also what I found is when I sit down and stand up again, I have to readjust the dress. It sort of rides up. And that also potentially could be because I couldn't find a zip that was long enough. So I didn't put the zip all the way into the bottom. Now I had another little accident with the zip. For some reason I ordered a closed zip instead of an open zip, and I got the zip in, it all looked amazing, it was a really blingy zip, and realised I needed an open zip, not a closed zip. So that's one where the two parts of the material can come apart at the end, and like you'd find on a jacket or say this dress, rather than something like a pencil case, which obviously you can't open, the zip is closed. And I thought, okay, I've done this wrong, but it doesn't matter, I can I can make it work. It doesn't matter that the dress doesn't open at the bottom, you know, I can still plenty of room to step inside it. Except when I came to do the lining and turn the whole thing inside out, it had to be apart for me to turn it inside out. So there was just no getting around it. I had to end up taking out the zip, and I had to put in an open zip, and this was the only one I had in my stash, which wasn't long enough and wasn't nearly as blingy, but as you can see, it opens at the end, which is great. So it's worth chatting a little bit about the lining. This was the first time that I have ever done a proper lining, and it wasn't quite as scary as I thought. It was fairly difficult to make the adjustments that I needed, because I'd adjusted every single piece within an inch of its life by the time I got to this point, because I'd obviously already done 2 tests. I'd adjusted the pattern pieces, I'd adjusted the outside on me, I'd adjusted it on me, on my dolly. So when it came to the lining, it was actually quite hard to work out what I needed to adjust so it all fitted. But as you can see, I got it in. It's not totally straight at the bottom. I'm not sure why, because it should be, but no one can see the inside, so only I need to know about that, which is great. I also thought that in the end the dress turned out to be a little bit too short on me, and I think that was probably to do with all the adjustment. I needed to adjust the skirt and the bodice to make sure that they joined at the right point on my waist, and I think it probably pulled the dress up, and which made it slightly shorter than probably I would have wanted it. Now, if it had been in a stretched fabric, I don't think it would have mattered so much, but because it doesn't stretch at all, when I sit down, I did find that it rose up quite a lot. So that was just something to be aware of. I feel like it might be one of those dresses that you go out in where you stand up rather than you're sitting down all evening. And coming to a close, what else is there to say? Well, I feel like I've pretty much told you everything. The instructions were good. I read them multiple times. It's always harder with a pattern, a big pattern company, because you don't have the tutorials online, you don't have the lovely colour pictures that you tend to have with the indie patterns, you don't have loads of people making the same outfit or the same dress so you can ask them questions. It's much more you're left to your own devices. And I think even though Vogue, I think, said it was an easy pattern, oh no, it says it's average, I think with all of the big companies it just is that much harder, because you're copying black and white line drawings really, which I just think is much more difficult. But I really, really enjoyed this slow and steady project. I know that the payoff isn't as good with a dress that literally took me most of September, but I don't want to create my own version of fast fashion with my own sewing. So it's nice to be able to make something that I think I will have in my cupboard for a long time. I hope it doesn't go out of fashion. A kind of a shift dress generally doesn't. Would I make it again? I probably would. I'm not sure I necessarily would need this sort of dress more than once, but I'm sure that I could change it up for it to look different enough, and potentially try a stretchier version, or maybe something a little less dressy. So I think that's probably it. I'm gonna, apologies if the editing seems a bit all over the place. I will put in some pictures and some video. I just haven't decided whereabouts I'm gonna put it yet. And one more thing, just if you were wondering what I'm wearing, I've just finished. This is the Lenny Papunkt Blouson Jack, which is German, so that is just a terrible accent, and apologies if that's not how you say it at all. And no doubt that this will be in a later video of mine, but I thought I'd just wear it because it's hot off the sewing machine. And if you have enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.